For this brand new episode of Trial Lawyer Prep, I am thrilled to introduce my guest, Matthew Fornero. Matthew is a South Florida business litigator with over 20 years of courtroom experience and a long track record of representing small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups in commercial litigation, contract disputes, and arbitration. But what brings him to the show today is something a little different. Matthew has become one of the foremost voices on using AI in trial practice and litigation. In this conversation, he is going to walk us through how he has used AI across multiple recent trials with success, the platform he relies on, how he prompts them, how he uses it in trial, and how to prepare for it, plus his rules for using AI responsibly and ethically. Whether you're curious or skeptical, this is an episode for you to walk away with a practical framework. Let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to Trial Lawyer Prep. I'm your host, Elizabeth Larrick, and we have an AI specialist with us today. I would love to welcome Matthew Fornero to the show, and he is going to talk to us about a recent trial where he used AI. So welcome to the show, Matthew.
Elizabeth, thanks for having me.
Of course. I mean, I have to tell you, you have a wonderful reputation on podcasts, and we're going to send a lot of links out when we broadcast this episode because you are pretty good at what you do. So give us a little interview, a little preview, a little background.
Sure. So, hello, everyone. It's me, Matthew Fornero. I am an attorney in Florida. I've been an attorney for 23 years. I'm licensed in Florida, DC, and New York, and I predominantly practice 90% commercial litigation and 10% transactional. I represent small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups regarding their legal needs, mostly litigation, arbitration, alternative dispute resolution, all that stuff. So I do a ton of litigation. I was in court all day today on Zoom, and I think once on Teams. So it depends on which fiefdom you're in. Some of them use different programs. But, that's what I do. I like litigation. I love the punishment. I love the non sequitur nature of it and how it doesn't make sense and how there's, no real winners or losers, just, whatever in litigation. So that's what I do. And I'm glad to talk about some interesting trial stuff. And like you said, I'm a big proponent for the responsible and ethical use of AI, which a lot of people just use AI and don't do it that way. And a lot of people got in trouble, particularly in our profession. So I always make sure. Yeah. So I always make sure, I fact, source check, site check everything I put out before I do it. But, I love the AI. I increasingly use it more and more, and I use it more and more in my legal practice, and I use it more and more in my trial practice. And I know we talked offline, previously, the last few trials I've essentially done with the assistance of multiple AI platforms as far as from, long-term initial getting ready, whatever, to actual, the trial is happening. I need to do stuff in a reactionary phase. So happy to talk about it in depth. We can go through it or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I think that is for our audience here. We are mostly trial lawyers, personal injury, employment law, but I know trial lawyers are very curious about using AI in new ways. We've heard about ways to use it for medical summaries and writing demands, but I think the way that you are using it for trial is different than what we've heard before. So I know I'm curious and the audience is curious to hear more. So tell me just a little bit about kind of that decision to use AI with an upcoming trial.
Sure. So, I don't do personal injury. I don't do cool medical malpractice stuff. There's not a lot of cool visual stuff going on. I just do, commercial litigation, like breach of contract, fraud, you owe me money, I owe you money, we're having a business divorce, that kind of thing. So,
which is very exciting, by the way. I've done a few of those, and trust me, they can be way more exciting than personal injury. Okay.
Yeah,
you have fun actors on both sides.
Yeah, it's all kinds of bad interpersonal conflicts between people and things like that. Like other litigation, but it's not I don't have a lot of more and more. There's more visual stuff, and there's more charts and demonstrative aids and whatever, because that's just how courtrooms are now, in modern courtrooms. That's everyone's looking for visuals, particularly when it's like a jury trial, no matter how lame your trial is, no matter how where's the flashing lights and the candy, where can I look? So they're always looking for that. So, I'm not as heavily dependent on cool, like, here's a picture of this wound or, or this accident reconstruction stuff. But there's a lot of AI stuff that just does that. But, like what I do with my AI in doing my trial preparation, again, when we spoke again offline, I have another trial coming up, allegedly 10-day jury trial starting on Monday. But like I said, I'm kind of like the second chair. So I'm not sweating it as much as the dude who's doing the serious preparation, but I am going to, obviously do stuff and gear up. But, I use a mix of different AI platforms just in my regular legal practice. And then I, obviously refine and do a little bit more when I get ready for trial. And what I basically do is, I use the AI as like a supplement to what I'm doing and kind of have it be like a general document arranger, a general like second set of eyes. And I make sure that I have all my stuff that I do, like I've been doing for, 20 years before I ever started using AI as an attorney, of like, okay, I'm the plaintiff or I'm the defendant. Here's my claims. Here's my defenses. Here's the elements I need to prove. Here's the elements that they need to prove. So the AI just helps me like do that in a much shorter time period and make sure that like I have a second set of eyes to make sure that everything that I've been doing the last 20 years is like good and effective, and it saves a lot of time and it makes things a lot more accurate and whatever. So like I have specific legal AI platforms that I have. Like I have West Co-Counsel, I have Clio's Vincent, I have OpenCase, and then I have like general large language model like ChatGPT, and then I have Galaxy.ai, which is a huge engine that has 6,000 different AI programs built into it. So I use all that as like a smorgasbord of like putting things together, assembling things, doing whatever, and basically like putting together the nucleus of my trial and then building from there. So I have like all my pleadings, I have all my proposed exhibits, I have all my proposed questions. I have all like, what are the elements? I have what are the facts? I have all the depositions. I have all the discovery responses. I have all that stuff. And basically, I review it to make sure I'm familiar with it and whatever. And then instead of taking, an insane amount of time like I used to of having to type everything out or do whatever, I have the AI assist me, particularly the legal AI stuff, assist me in putting together like, okay, I have a breach of contract case, I have fraud, I have like some statutory stuff, whatever. And then the AI and I like collaborate on putting together like, okay, well, here's your witness list. Here's all your witnesses. Who do you want to call first? What do you want them to say? What do you want, them not to say? And just running all that through the AI helps you like essentially assemble your trial. As far as you obviously are in charge, you're the final say, but you take all your exhibits, you consult with the AI and figure out, okay, what's the best order to come up with my exhibits? How should I do my exhibits? My witnesses, what's the best order for my witnesses? You just collaborate back and forth with the AI, making sure that your prompts are very specific and very good, because the AI is only as good as the prompts you put into it. And you got to make sure even for the legal specific stuff, you have to set everything up, not perfectly, but you have to make sure that you put the fence around what you're doing. So like I am 20 plus year business law attorney Matthew Fornero, who has however much experience doing whatever. This is a state court case in Broward County, Florida, in front of this judge. And then basically you go back and forth and refine it till you come up with your plan. And then basically you take your plan and then keep refining it. You're not relying totally on it, but you're using it for insight and, like a truly objective second set of eyes or virtual eyes, whatever. And as things develop in the trial, and if you want to change something or do something, you update your AI prompts or whatever, and you'd be like, oh, this witness got on the stand and was a disaster, and now I have to rehabilitate him or her and come up with whatever. How do I do that? And basically, it's just a supplement to your trial preparation, your trial execution, whatever. And it's like a second set of eyes. It's like a second chair, third chair, whatever you want, where, you don't rely on solely what the AI says. You use it as an augmentation to your own abilities and your own whatever. As long as, you check over it, make sure you do things, makes the trial so much easier, because just things that you would have to think about and, second guess yourself or whatever doesn't exist anymore, because it's all taken care of. And then, okay, that's a good plan. I wish I would have thought of that. And then you just go with it.
So my question is, are you feeding it your strategy and your case themes? And are you teaching it about storytelling when you're thinking through? Because I get it, putting exhibits in order, read this depo, come up with some questions. But are you feeding it really kind of your actual lawyer persuasion kind of stuff?
I don't want to say save that for myself, but I put some of that in there. But like I said, I try to keep it as black and white and kind of dry as possible, where I just wanted to do pure ministerial work.
What I'm thinking more about is, so for example, just tried a case with a large group of trial lawyers, and we had a case theme that went through every witness, and we echoed some questions. So that's what I'm kind of asking about, is thinking.
Yeah, if I have an overriding plan or whatever, I'll be ultimately, here's what we're going to do. And then obviously I put that as part of my massive, filibuster prompt before I start doing anything as far as whatever. But yeah, I put some of that in there. But most of the humanity, whatever theme development or whatever, I still leave that for the human to do as opposed to the AI to do. But yeah, I collaborate with it a little bit to do that.
Sure. And also just thinking through kind of basics of brain science, okay, well, you think about the primacy, what's the first thing that's most important to say, or the sequencing of this. So do you normally like to use AI to do that kind of brain science stuff?
Yeah. What should we do first, second, third? How should we develop this and do whatever? So yeah, it's really helpful because, I may be wrong, it may be wrong, but if we collaborate together, we'll at least come up with a plan that I probably wouldn't have thought of, or it, is incapable or whatever of thinking of without human assistance, and then put it together, and it's probably a successful combo.
So one of the things you said that kind of was a light bulb moment for me was thinking through, if I was going to get you up to speed on the trial that we're about to do, I would have to spend so much time getting you up to speed and then getting you to ask me questions and to get, kind of the brainstorming going. So do you feel like it really helps speed up that kind of a little bit of that creative process that you would have with a second chair or an associate?
Yeah, because you're essentially telling the inside story of the case to a second party or third party, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it facilitates you better understanding your own case and how you're going to present it to an objective third party, because you're presenting it to a subjective third party to begin with. And then you figure out how you're going to be oh, okay, well, here's this and that and that. But it facilitates communication with anyone, because it makes you have to really distill down what you're doing and whatever, instead of being totally unorganized or, partially organized or whatever. It really helps you focus and figure out what's important and how to tamp down on what it is you need to do at trial.
Awesome. Well, let's talk then about specifics, because I know that's going to be helpful for most people to hear maybe something specific that you were able to do or use in a recent trial.
Sure. So I had the LLC divorce case, all right, that I originally, probably my first AI heavily used trial that I did. So I represented the defendant in a LLC divorce case, basically, where it was two members of an LLC splitting up, doing whatever, and we were the defendant. We, won, quote unquote, we prevailed. We got a jury verdict in our favor where they got 0. And then under the operating agreement and under a proposal for settlement, which is a statutory thing in Florida, I got our attorney's fees and our costs. So the AI helped me, because there were really nerdy like accounting documents and like spreadsheets and stuff. The AI really helped me go through all that information from a document review standpoint to begin with and know like, okay, this is what my guy was responsible for. This is what the other guy was responsible for. And it really saved me a lot of time from having to either do all that stuff myself or pay for like a outsourced doc review or something like that. So it got, those thousands of documents like good and ready to go. So I knew essentially what was in there. So then that kind of proved our defenses because they were trying to say like, oh, you didn't keep corporate formalities, you didn't do anything. And I'm like, okay, well, here's 5,000 pages of, responsibility of who did what or whatever. And then I had it all indexed and everything. So I could just pull up whatever and be like, this account goes here, this account goes here, this account goes. That was effective because it was the jury. And, the jury's like, oh, there's this thick a piece of like whatever. Obviously, if the other guy's saying they don't do anything right, what's all this paper for or whatever? So then that was a huge exhibit or whatever. And then again, I didn't have to go through the nitty gritty or whatever. The AI helped, collate and put it all together and break down specifically what was in there. So that was a pretty effective tool. And then obviously, also just as far as like the AI helped me figure out like what order I wanted to put my witnesses, how I wanted to impeach their witnesses, some ideas as far as what their causes of action were, what my defenses were, and just kind of, really helped put together a good outline and game plan for how to run the trial. So, it's just like I said, it's a great supplement to really put together everything in focus and just go execute at trial at a high level, because a lot of the things that you second guess on, a lot of things that you, oh, did I overlook this or whatever, the AI kind of fills in the gaps and helps you make sure that you don't overlook everything, particularly if you don't have a large trial team or a large, budget to do whatever. I mean, it's like a great democratizer, equalizer.
Well, let's break it down a little bit. So document review is something that every lawyer has to do, whether it's medical records or emails or business records. So tell me a little bit about the platform that you used and how confident you felt in that it was actually like, it wasn't missing anything in the documents.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the whole world of like legal AI stuff really started with like document review and document stuff. And there's like a lot of established huge document companies and, things that have been around for a long time. So like West, who's, the premier publisher along with Lexis, has in their co-counsel, they've developed a whole document review protocol and a whole document review thing that you don't need the specialized document software anymore because this does it. So like the West co-counsel does it just as good, in my opinion, because I've seen some of that stuff, like the synchrony and all that other stuff. It, fact checks everything, it verifies everything, and then obviously you fact check it and proof check it against what you did anyways to make sure it's all there. But no, it's a great platform, a great time saver, a great resource saver.
So what I hear you saying is that's the main one you depend on when you're doing some of this trial preparation for jury instructions and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, because it's also not a specific large language model. It is a closed universe of only West material and whatever you give it. So it's not going to do all these crazy things like hallucinate things. It's not going to make up citations. It's not going to tell you what the law in New Zealand is by accident or anything like that. It's totally focused only on the world of West publishing. So the legal research portion is totally closed off, walled off. It can't hallucinate. It doesn't do anything. And then the fact portion is only what you give it. It doesn't go and find facts or hallucinate facts anywhere else or whatever. It only does what you tell it to do, and it only looks at what you give it to look at. The biggest knock on like large language models like, ChatGPT or whatever else thing you're using, whether it's Google or Gemini or, anything else, is that it wanders off into, Reddit and all, Foursquare and crazy things and draws information from outside of a defined set of parameters. And that's how you get, hallucinated case law. That's how you get hallucinated facts or whatever. If that doesn't exist in the universe you're operating in, then the chances of it happening are microscopic. Could still happen. Not saying
Sure.
it
I
can't
think
happen.
more what I was thinking of is there are a lot of times that have closed systems where you feed them a large amount of documents and they still don't seem to get all the things that are in the document. So that's why I'm trying to say it sounds to me like you feel really confident about West Co-Counsel that when you're fitting in those 5,000 documents for that trial and that you felt really confident that, again, because you've used it probably so much that it didn't miss anything in those documents.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% confident in like a document review thing. I know it's not going to miss those documents. Again, I still fact check, proof check, and make sure it went through all that stuff. I'm not like just blindly like, oh, West, whatever you say is, like, whatever West said, I'm going down with heart. No, but as a supplement, instead of me looking at the stuff and then giving it to doc review attorneys or associates or whatever to go through, as the second set of eyes to go through it, collate it, and whatever, it has not failed me yet. And based on the way that it's programmed and the universe it operates in, I don't foresee it happening, but it can. And again, that's why I'm not, like I said, I just don't blindly march in there. I still do the legwork and then, save a lot of time on the redundancy with using the AI.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. Well, you talked about doc review. You talked a little about jury instructions. So I'm really curious about kind of how you're doing that, because I know there are some of us who we sometimes face this question about like how many questions on our jury, verdict form and which instructions go in. So walk us through a little bit about kind of how you're doing that jury instruction part.
Sure. So for like state court in Florida, like, we have our Florida Supreme Court approved jury instructions for every single kind of law you can imagine. You have your general civil, like, your general civil law, which encompasses everything. And then you have like the business specific ones, which are the breach of contract, the unjust enrichment. You have your personal injury specific ones, your medical malpractice specific ones. So a lot of it's already covered and it's just using the language that's in there. But then there's special things where there's certain affirmative defenses that are, there's no uniform jury instruction for that, or there's no uniform jury instruction for like a really whacked out, multi-faceted, contingent fact pattern or something like that. So the AI, helps you because it draws straight from the fact sources. And then you tell it like, well, I have a unique circumstance because, I have this going on or whatever. And then it'll help you come up with ideas of like, okay, well, here's some possible jury instructions to look at regarding your unique circumstances where you can't use uniform jury instructions. And then basically you take its work product and then you use your own skill and, whatever it is you have, and then put it together. And then you come up with your proposed instructions, which of course the other side objects to. And then the court decides what it's going to use as far as the jury instructions based on things that aren't standard uniform jury instructions. But it helps being able to formulate that stuff, whereas opposed to in the past, well, let me go pull a case that says what, a deficit claim is in Florida or whatever. And then instead of being like, well, let me put together the elements or whatever, it just helps you integrate it and do it a lot easier than most. And then as far as the verdict form, you put together your ideas as far as the verdict form, like here's what I want it to do. And then it'll help you look at different alternatives and different options as far as like, wow, I didn't think to have it be like, and or go down to this box, and or go down to this. That's a pretty good idea. And then obviously the other side objects to it. And then the judge goes through it. And then you get your formulated jury instruction and your formulated verdict form. But it gives you alternatives and ideas that you may not have thought of yourself, or permutations of things where it's like various shades of gray versus black and white. And it helps fill that in.
Awesome. I'm really curious, Matthew, how you're using it in trial for like cross-examination. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It helps you come up with, you review your discovery responses, your depositions, you see where people tripped up and did stuff or whatever, and you feed all your questions and all your stuff into it. And then you'd be like, okay, well, there any gaps, anything, I should be looking at, or any cool stuff, or anything you can think of based on here's what they're alleging and here's what they need to prove and here's the questions I have, and then using it during trial if things happen. Like I said, you have it set up where you have your whole schema of your trial in the prompt or whatever, in the working box or whatever you want to call it. And then as things happen or whatever, you just update it and you'd be like, my client admitted, he did whatever crazy. And then how do I rebut that? And then, it'll give you ideas, and then you just use it combined with your own skill and knowledge. And then, you go from there.
So those are kind of two separate things. So let me just ask, for the creating of cross-exam questions, that kind of thing, what kind of platforms are you using to help kind of do that?
So I use the co-counsel, I use the Clio Vincent, and then I kind of run it through a large language model as like a quarterback to take the information of my questions, my stuff, the stuff I came up with, the stuff that my specialized AI came up with, the stuff that my other specialized AI came up with. And then basically I have it coalesce it into a, working model of, okay, well, here's everything together in a cohesive fashion that doesn't be redundant or stupid and doesn't, make you bored or something like that in a not an entertaining, but in a didactic fashion that goes from point A to point Z that matches your theme of your case, what you need to prove, what they need to prove, whatever. And then basically it synthesizes it into a pretty good final version where obviously you take it, you go over it, you do the tweaks yourself, but it takes all of the base information that you get from all the various sources and puts it together into a pretty good, almost final product for you to use.
And then what are you using in trial?
So in trial, I use, depending on what I do, I have the Galaxy AI, which I said is like a huge repository of like 6,000 different, it's up to almost 6,000 now. It was 3,000 when I started. It's got 6,000 different AI programs in it. So there's like literally 100 specific AI legal programs that are in Galaxy AI. So for in trial, for graphic presentation or for certain things or whatever, great platform because there's very specific things to do, like slideshow presentations, to do PDF presentations, JPEG presentations, to do video, to do whatever. It's all built in there versus, you going and buying like 10 different apps or trial apps to do it. It's all in there. So it makes a good visual presentation, makes a good effective showing in trial.
And for the one, though, that's helping you, like if you're on a cross exam, you're going to have to rehab somebody, which one is that you're feeding information and getting output? Is that still co-counsel?
Yeah, that's still co-counsel.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Co-counsel is like if the Titanic's going down and we can only save one thing on the ship, grab the co-counsel and go overboard.
Do you have a sponsor?
No, it's just, it was, the thing with co-counsel is that it's again, I've not paid, I pay, I don't get paid by them. So they were innovators in this space and they existed for, like over going back, like before the pandemic, they were their own company. And then West like bought them because West was messing around with AI and they're like, well, let's just buy co-counsel. And so what they did was they took a very good program and then integrated it into all of West's knowledge. And so that's why, in my opinion, it's the best legal AI platform there is, because West, I always have liked better than Lexis because there's more in West as far as source material, legal material, whatever, because West has more publishing, more secondary sources and whatever. But that's a whole like law school, like gang thing where like you're either team Lexis or team West, whatever. So it's really effective and it really works. And it's really helped me in my, not just my trial practice, but my legal practice. And then, as I become more versed in AI and learning how to use different AI platforms, I've integrated more stuff in to make it a more cohesive package, a more like safety protocols, all the stuff that's in there to make sure that I'm not just, like I said, blindly like West, whatever you say, I'm not blindly going down with the ship. I make sure that it's all redundant, fact checked, and everything like that. So,
Gotcha. Awesome. Okay, so I have a couple of like my consulting brain is like, let me ask you these questions. So, okay, so do you ever use it? I know some people will play and literally practice jury selection with AI. Have you ever practiced your jury selection with AI?
yeah, I'll use like chat for that, for like a general perspective, and I'll just give it like a whole thing. And it's interesting because, I'm a big LinkedIn troll. So I love LinkedIn. I hang out on LinkedIn all day long. And, I still, for whatever reason, still like Facebook. And like I said, all I do is I get hit with ads 24/7 on all my social media for law stuff and for AI stuff. And it's interesting because there's probably half a dozen jury picking / what will a jury do AI platforms out there. I just use the general models to try to figure out, some ideas or whatever. But there's like actual AI models out there who it'll be like, oh, we'll do a full simulated jury for you. And I'm like, how the hell does the AI do the full simulated jury? Like, I don't know. But, or they'll do like the full simulated like voir dire or like the whole thing where like that's the whole AI program. That's all it does. So, it's very interesting. I'm not up to that point yet of using like such a very niche specialized thing for that, but I'll use like the large language model and just kind of mess around with it a little bit to be like, oh, what do you think about this? Or, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. And that was going to be my next question. There are so many AI jury simulation models that are out there, and it sounds to me like you haven't tried any of them just yet.
No, I haven't, because I think that a lot of that is like more for like a certain type of litigation versus like commercial litigation. Like, like I think the AI jury model, whatever, is probably more conducive to like a injury case or like a medical malpractice case where it's like, I deal a lot with, not just liquidated damages, but damages that have like quantification or qualification that we can put on, like, what is my breach of contract worth, or what is my whatever worth, where like we don't really have to get that speculative or whatever, versus like, I lost a limb, what price do you put on that? Or like, I'm blind, some crazy thing or whatever, where you can't like quantify damages as easy. So I think that those AIs or those AI programs are probably more conducive to that than they are for like a straight, like, well, it's a liquidated sum, or it's a, that kind of thing.
Sure. But so let's take damages off the table, and just from a persuasion and strategy kind of a thing, would you ever consider using one of the AI jury simulators?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. The more I see some, like, I don't want to say like critical science on it, but the more I see like some verified stuff on it, I would. I'm talking about various programs that I've used successfully, whatever. Okay. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about the virtual jury AI stuff yet in an objective fashion. When I do, maybe I'll go after it then. But, I see them trying to push and sell me a lot of that stuff. But I don't see like, we're on, Elizabeth's podcast talking about, well, my AI jury selection did 100% accuracy and nailed it 100% right down to the penny. So once we get to that position, yeah, probably I'll use it.
Yeah. And I was going to say, so there's a lot of people, or a lot of lawyers, I should say, who you're just getting started out and you're bombarded with all the AI options. You've done a lot of vetting already. So what are some questions or things that if people are starting out using AI, they should look at, or what are kind of some vetting things that they should pay attention to?
If you're just getting into AI or you kind of just dabble in it, you don't really, you're going to drown just in the information you're hit with of not knowing what to do or whatever. So, you want to look at stuff that actually has, I understand there's innovative stuff and there's new stuff you got to get going, whatever, but look at something that at least, I don't want to say has a track record, but at least is viable and is proven or conceptually proven. So a lot of the stuff out there is like really theoretical or whatever. You got to make sure, you always need a large language model as part of your AI package. I use ChatGPT. A lot of people are switching to Claude or Gemini or whatever. I'm fine with ChatGPT. It's not broke. I'm pretty good at using it at this point in time. I've checked out Claude. There's a lot of people because Claude's really trying to push itself in the legal industry because there's a lot of like specialization or whatever, which like I'm like, okay. So, you always have a large language model. And then for attorneys, like a legal focused AI where you can have more than one. I mean, Lexis has its own AI program. West has its own AI program. Clio has its own AI program. Then there's other things like Vine, which is another AI program. There's Harvey, which is another AI legal program. There's I forget the name of it. There's another one that just came out that's aimed at mid-sized law firms only. So Harvey is like the large law firm like AI thing, and like they've got a really great marketing department because a lot of large law firms have bought Harvey or whatever. So I mean, you just got to figure out what works for you. I mean, someone may be watching your show and be like, "What the hell's he talking about? Co-counsel? It's terrible," or
Well, right,
or someone
right.
else is like, "Co-counsel is great." So I mean, figure out what works for you. I mean, it's just like anything else. What works for me may not work for you, or vice versa. But you got to find what works.
Right.
And one of the things you have to do is make sure, you have the basic package, and then your specialized stuff, and then your really specialized stuff. So like the really specialized stuff is like the really theoretical stuff that's still like not necessarily road tested, proven stuff, like the jury stuff. So I'm not really there yet with that stuff. I'm at definitely the large language generalized stuff, 100%. The semi-specialized like legal platform stuff, yes. The very niche specialized like trial exhibit AI, stuff like that, not yet. But like I said, you can explore and try out a lot of different AIs. It's not that expensive.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's kind of a total fall down the rabbit hole, and like you could bump into all kinds of different kind of stuff. So I think what I hear you saying is look for a track record. If something is new and shiny, like take a double pause and see if this is actually going to be.
It could be great or it could be terrible. You'll never know. I mean,
Well, I think you're saying look for a track record. Like you mentioned, for you, co-counsel is like you feel really confident. You know exactly where it came from. You know it has all the stuff that you trust with West. So that is something that you have easily recommend to people and have no problem. And like you said, some of the stuff you've recommended here today, but new things are coming out, test it, but look for a track record.
Yeah. Trust but verify.
Yes, trust but verify.
But it's true. I mean, some of this new stuff will be great. It's just, you don't want to be the person who's like the innovator. You don't want to be the Neil Armstrong on the moon of, some new cutting edge AI during trial. And then it cuts out. And then all of a sudden you're back in the Stone Age. You're like, where's my easel? What do I do? You got to make sure you have a backup system in place just in case.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining the podcast. It has been so helpful. I know there are lots of people who are dabbling, and we are all people who get inundated constantly with new emails for different AI programs for lawyers. So you have been so helpful. I'm going to leave some links, but if people want to reach out to you to learn more, I know you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this AI and using it in your trials and legal practice. So where is the best place people could go to reach you?
Sure. So just go to my website, which is fornerolegal.com. And then it's got all my contact information. It's got all my social media, and it's got all my blogs and stuff and videos about AI and attorneys in AI and attorneys making mistakes with AI and attorneys doing good things with AI. So if you have any questions or whatever, just feel free to email or call me.
Wonderful. If you are interested in hearing a little more, he has all of his podcast guest spots on his website as well. So if you want more, there is more on Matthew's website, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Thank you again so much for joining the podcast. What parting words would you tell to some trial lawyers who are maybe they're just starting out, maybe they're just dabbling with AI?
AI is great, but you got to take ownership over it no matter what you're using it for in any capacity. And it always starts and stops with you, the Harry Truman buck stops here thing. So you can use it, just make sure you're in control of it and you don't blindly follow it. And it'll do great things. It'll save you time. It'll do a lot of work. You just got to find what works for you and use it correctly.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Thank you all for joining and listening in today. And until next time, keep on prepping.